to order. Welcome to meeting number 122 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs. Conformément à l'article 108.2.
Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, January 29, 2024, the committee is resuming its study on the lived experience of Indigenous and Black veterans. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format, and I would like to welcome the members who are online and our witnesses online.
Nous avons aussi Tim Lewis, who replaced Mr. Miao. We also have other colleagues and on the web, and we have Mel Arnold, who is there also, who replaced Mr. Tolmy. Monsieur Martin Champoux, qui est ici aussi.
We have Mr. Martin Champoux, who is replacing Mr. Désilet today. I would like to remind everyone that all comments need to be made through the chair. And as usual, on behalf of the committee members and on behalf of committee members, I would like to welcome the witnesses and people listening.
We welcome back Atlas Institute for Veterans and Families. We have with us Marianne Notariani, Deputy Chief Executive Officer and Executive Vice President, Knowledge and Mobilization. Myriam Bellamri, Director, Knowledge Mobilization by Video Conference. From Inspire, we have Yvan Guy Larocque, Board of Directors, Clinical Counsel, University of Manitoba Faculty of Law by video conference also, and Mr. William Shedd, Board of Directors by video conference. And the last post found, we have Maria Antonia Trujillo, Project Coordinator, Indigenous Veteran Initiative by video conference. So I think that you know the words because you were there before. But I'm going to start with Atlas Institute for Veterans and Family. You're going to have oh, okay. I heard that, okay, they're not going to do any opening remarks. That's great because already all of them? Okay, so all of the witnesses already made their opening remarks. So we will start right away with question and answers. So, and I'm going to start with Mrs. Kathy Wagenthal for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you very much, Chair, and very pleased that we were able to have you folks come back so that we could do this properly and ask you some questions. Marianne, can I call you Marianne? Is that all right? Can you just, for those of us that may not know, give an explanation or define what knowledge mobilization means?
Happy to. Yes, thank you for that question. So knowledge mobilization at its core is all about taking evidence and getting it in front of, in the hands of those who can use it. So it's really about getting knowledge, information, and packaging it in such a way that it will reach the intended audience. And at the core, knowledge mobilization is also about mobilizing or moving that evidence into action so that it could have a positive impact. And that's really how we approach it at Atlas. So the simplest definition is taking information, getting it in the hands of those who can use it. And I'd be happy to elaborate on our approach and the way that we do that at Atlas, since it can take different forms, if there's time permitting.
Yeah, okay. What are your funding sources?
So we are funded through Veterans Affairs Canada.
Okay.
So our primary funding comes through a contribution agreement with Veterans Affairs Canada.
Okay, and so are they the major source of what would be studied as far as requesting studies to be done and research to be done?
So we exist as an arm's length organization. We are set up intentionally as such through the contribution agreement. And that means that they give us our funding and they outline the pillars or main functions of how we work, research being one of them. At the same time, there is that distance in that they aren't directing what exactly we study, which allows us to look at what the gaps are in the research and, importantly, to consult with, engage veterans and their families on what matters to them, also scan the landscape, see what's being done, and really look for opportunities to find areas where there is a need for more research, and that's part of how we determine what we'll research. So we're funded to do research, but VAC doesn't get to tell us what to research.
What you're going to research. Can you give me one really significant example from your perspective of where you found a gap and made the decision to do the research?
Yes, happy to. In some respects, like and I think this complements what you as a committee have done around women veterans and seeing big gaps there. And so that's something we identified early on and have taken an approach to be very participatory in how we set out a program of study around women veterans, mental health and well-being. And so we've done that through our Athena project. We presented to this committee in the spring under your previous study around that when it was early days, and now actually have 2 studies underway. Sure, yes, sorry.
Thank you. I just have
I'm mindful of time, sorry.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you. So you're doing the research. How is it that you determine which veterans to reach out to, and how do you reach out to ensure that you get a significant cohort to get the results that you would really need to be able to say this is exactly what we have as outcomes that are accurate?
So that's a great question, and there's a couple of ways I'd like to address that. One, when we're designing research studies, we recruit based on the study that we're doing. So that's going to have certain inclusion criteria depending on the topic of study. We do clinical research, we do applied research, which could be qualitative and more about interviews, for example, and the people in which we are conducting research or that would be implicated in that research, or the subjects of the research, for lack of a better word, we would have those criteria that we need, and we use all sorts of strategies to get the word out in terms of reaching veterans and families that fit that profile so that we can get the samples we need to have a study that gives us robust enough evidence to speak to.
Question on that.
Yep.
As you're probably aware, there are all kinds of veterans groups online that are in the thousands. Do you ever reach out to them to say, here's what we're studying, if you think you could contribute, reach out to us, and then, of course, you do what you need to do to ensure that they would fit into that scenario? Have you done that?
Of course, yes. We use a variety of channels, and we leverage social media to get the word out through organic posts, even paid social media, just to try to reach people in different platforms. We will work through groups that are willing to post for us. We will work through individual champions that have large networks. I know, I've met someone myself who was a veteran who was very proud of the network she had and said she would share things, and absolutely, we use all sorts of ways to reach as diverse a group and as wide a group as possible.
Do you reach out to the veterans advisory groups that the government has?
So, and we actually have some of our staff, our lived experience staff, have membership on a couple of those advisory groups, and we're connected with people in various ways on those advisory groups. VAC is certainly a champion in terms of spreading the word for us through VAC Salute and through other community engagement outreach in particular. So I would think that in many ways we, through our personal networks, through our official networks, we get the word out.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have no time left. Is that what you're saying? 20 seconds.
Yes.
Okay. I'd hope to get to the last post fund as well. I'm quite concerned about the challenges they're facing, but unfortunately I'll have to leave that for someone else to pursue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now let's go to MP Randip Sarai for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the guests for coming back. I'm going to ask some online because they always get neglected and the person in the room sometimes gets more questions. So I'll ask my first question to Inspire. Could you share more details about the Indigenous Post-Secondary Scholarship Trust, including how it was established, its intent, and the impact that the program is having?
Well, I think I could probably answer that because I was there when it was established. In 1995, the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs. They had a study on Aboriginal veterans chaired or co-chaired by the late Senator Len Marchand. One of their recommendations to the government was to establish a scholarship and bursary fund to commemorate the service of Aboriginal veterans. This they did, and they called for proposals from various organizations, sort of an expression of interest if they would be prepared to administer the fund. And the organization that succeeded was the Canadian Native Arts Foundation, at the time chaired by John Kimbell. It was a small organization raising money to support Aboriginal artists. Subsequently, when we took over the fund, we realized that that fund could not be used strictly for arts. It had to be for a broad variety of scholarships and disciplines. And when we did that, we said we can't call ourselves the Canadian Native Arts Foundation. We have to call ourselves something else. And we came up with the concept of the National Aboriginal Achievement Foundation, because at the time we also were sponsoring the Achievement Awards, which are now known as the Inspired Awards, because some years ago we changed our name again to Inspire, IND for Indigenous, SPIR for Inspiration. We found that the National Aboriginal Achievement Foundation was quite long, and it also had to be translated into French, and that was very difficult. The word inspired does not need to be translated, and we came up with a logo and a whole range of things to really change our image. We also reached out to industry and other organizations, and we changed our fundraising and our strategies for fundraising to the point where we're now able to raise a significant amount of funds, not just from individual donors, but from corporations, businesses, and also from various departments of the government.
While I have you there, sorry, just because of time, I wanted to ask my next question, so sorry to cut you off there, but can you tell us how Indigenous veterans can contribute to education for younger generations, especially in terms of advocating for their own communities and ensuring that contributions to Canadian military history are taught and acknowledged by everyone?
Well, veterans are called upon regularly to speak at significant events like the anniversary of significant battles like the Battle of Vimy Ridge and the Dieppe raids. And also they are also called upon heavily at Remembrance Day. So when we go out, we also speak about the need for individuals students, young people, to stay with their program of education. A number of us are involved with another organization that sponsors Volunteer Speakers Bureau, and that's the Memory Project. So it's not just inspire to reach out and encourage people to stick with education. We do that. We have, what do we call it now? It's gatherings of students when we have the Achievement Awards or the Inspired Awards. And we get about 1,500 students at each time we have these events. And it's like a trade show where they learn about education opportunities from various universities and job opportunities in various industries, whether it's mining or general business, banking, etc.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask quickly to the Last Post Fund. It's been 5 years since the Last Post Fund introduced the Indigenous Veterans Initiative, and could you care to share some key facts and figures of the impact of that program in its first 5 years, and how do you hope the program will evolve in the next 5 years?
Yeah, sure. So far,
Quickly, by the way, because I only
45
have 60 seconds.
So we've worked so far with 45 communities, Indigenous communities throughout Canada, and 25. We work with researchers too, and out of those 45 communities, we've worked with 25 local researchers from the community, and that has led to over 270 grave markers being placed in previously unmarked graves for Indigenous veterans. Another component of the program is we do add the traditional name of the veteran on new tombstones, but we'll go back retroactively too and add any traditional names that we missed. So that has also been something that has been quite popular. And hoping for the next 5 years that we do get more interest in the program. The difficult thing is outreach, but we're hoping that at least the next 5 years we can place. The goal would be, I think, 500 more tombstones for previously unmarked graves.
Thank you very much. Et maintenant, nous allons passer la parole.
We are now going to give the floor for the next 6 minutes to Mr. Martin Champoux. You have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being with us today. I wasn't here the first time that the witnesses were in front of the committee, so I was not able to hear the opening remarks that would have given me a bit more context. But please forgive me in this case if I ask questions that might seem a bit repetitive. I'll start with the Atlas Institute for Ms. Notariani or Ms. Ben Lamry. You answered a question asked by Ms. Wagenthal that your organization is mostly funded by Veterans Affairs. What are the other sources of funding for your organization?
So Veterans Affairs Canada is our primary funder. We have had modest amounts of funding through a couple of partner agreements for specific initiatives that we've undertaken.
Public, privé?
Public.
Public, d'accord. Et vous pouvez les identifier?
Can you tell us which ones they are?
We've done a partnership with the Canadian Institute for Public Safety Research and Treatment, who had funds through Public Health Agency of Canada. It was related to some of that COVID-19 funding, I think, that went out. So that's one example, and I believe another similar center in the public sphere.
Okay. Vous avez aussi dit que...
You've said that your funding sources, for example, Veterans Affairs, do not decide the research topics for you, you decide them. Have you carried out any research regarding Indigenous and Black veterans? And I apologize again if you already have answered these questions, but a brief answer, please. What have your studies been, and what have the conclusions been?
No apologies necessary. We don't have specific study of research on Indigenous veterans or Black veterans. We are doing some knowledge mobilization work around First Nations, Inuit, Métis veterans. Miriam's on the call and could speak more if there's some time.
Yes, thank you. So, yeah, it was brought to our attention early on the need for targeted, culturally relevant, psychoeducational information that's specific to the unique experiences of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis veterans and families. And so in response, the Atlas Institute has initiated a project where we're hoping to co-develop knowledge products in collaboration with First Nation, Inuit, and Métis Advisory Group. At the moment, we are co-leading this work with two senior strategists. So Tim Malone, who's a veteran from the Satu'dine First Nation, as well as Shauna Mulligan, who is a Métis PhD student in Indigenous Studies and a CAF Reserve Corporal retired. So we've been working quite closely with these folks to learn what our role might be in supporting the development of informational resources, as well as learning about how we can facilitate the co-creation. We started this work in 2023, and we're hoping it'll keep going past 2027. So really wanted to take the time to make sure that we do this work in a culturally relevant and informed manner.
Est-ce que vous remarquez dans vos recherches...
I understand that your study will go on until 2027, so that seems like a very in-depth study. Have you noticed any specific needs or any elements that will be part of your recommendations in your report? Is there anything that jumps out at you?
Yeah, so just to clarify, it's not a research study, it's a knowledge mobilization project. So the hope is by the end of the project, we'll have co-created informational resources that do a couple of things. First, honor the sacrifices of First Nation, Inuit, and Métis veterans, as well as identify some of their mental health knowledge needs, and then address them through some information. That being said, recently we did host a roundtable in October with a focus on access to care, mental health care in rural and remote locations. So what we did is we hosted an in-person event where we asked veterans and family members alongside policymakers, researchers, service providers, and then some other system level players to share their experiences on the barriers, but then also success factors and potential areas for change in relation to their experiences and understanding of accessing mental health care in rural and remote areas. We did hear 3 themes that we spoke to in our earlier testimony, but I can go over them again. The first theme that came through, we heard from folks the importance of culturally relevant care and models of healing. So what we heard is many First Nation, Inuit, Métis veterans find that accessing cultural, traditional ways of healing can support their well-being journeys. But unfortunately, oftentimes these are not considered healthcare, so they are not covered. And in some cases, they are also not available. So community leaders have shared that they'd like to see Veterans Affairs Canada adopt a policy that allows for traditional healing approaches within communities and with those costs covered. That was the first theme. The second theme that we
En 30
heard...
secondes.
I have about 30 seconds left.
Second theme we heard was that trust needs to be built and earned. And the third one was that there needs to be more clarity around provision of mental health care. So it's not always clear to Indigenous veterans who is responsible for coverage. Is it federal entities or provincial or territorial health coverage? So that would be helpful for folks to get more clarity and support in navigating the system.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Champoux.
Thank you, Mr. Champoux.
We're going to give the floor to Miss Rachel Blaney for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, Chair. And I'm going to first go to the Last Post Fund. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate the work that is being done. I think it's really sacred work, so just thank you for doing that. I'm just curious if you could talk to us a little bit about what work you've done around creating a culturally safe framework so that the processes unfold. I think it's really important for us to see how Indigenous-led projects are actually addressing those issues so that we can talk about how other organizations might do the same. I think that would just be really helpful for us. And then the second question I have is just how do the connections get built to identify where the unmarked graves are? And I know that a lot of the communities are very remote. So I imagine the funding to get to some of those locations might be challenging. If you could just talk a little bit about that and if that limits your ability to do the work.
Yeah, maybe I'll start off with your second question because I kind of have more in mind to say about that, and then I'll move on to the first one. So the way that we contact communities so far, and also I guess as a result of COVID, has been through phone and online meetings. And I first approach the band office, and usually it's the lands department. There's a lot of work being done around cemeteries and communities, and it's usually being done by, it varies, of course, in each community, but it tends to be done by the lands department. So usually they have either a plan in place of where the veterans might be buried, and they usually share that with us. One of the components of the Indigenous Veterans Initiative is that we provide an honorarium for a member of the community or the band office itself to carry out the research on identifying the unmarked graves of a veteran on our behalf. And with the 45 communities that we've worked with, about half of them have had a researcher. And that person's crucial to the work we do because they identify who is missing a grave marker. And they'll also help us find the traditional name of the veteran when it's available. So I think thanks to technology, it's kind of worked so far. We haven't necessarily had to go to any community so far to actually let them know about this work. I would say we're lucky when there's a community that has veterans, there tends to be a veteran culture in that community. So usually we're connected with people that work already on the Remembrance Day Committee or somebody that honors the veterans already. And usually that person is already interested in the work we do. So we've been lucky in that sense. Where it's been tricky, I think, is if there's less of a culture of Remembrance Day in a community, there isn't really like a key person to go to. So I think that's like kind of one of the challenges, even though there might actually be veterans buried in an unmarked grave in that community. So so that's in regards to the second question. First question, well, when we started this work, we realized that families were kind of asking us for, because one of the components is if there's a culturally relevant symbol, the family has the choice to add that on the tombstone. So this is different from non-Indigenous veterans where we usually offer the cross or a military crest. For Indigenous veterans, if the community has a symbol or if the family themselves belong to a clan or they have a family symbol, then we definitely allow and encourage the family to go with that symbol if they like. So one of the gaps that we noticed is the families were asking for a certain type of symbol, but we didn't really have any in stock. So one of the ways we tackled this is that we hired a Cree artist and he created 7 symbols based on the 7 sacred teaching symbols. And these are offered to family as one of the choices they have if they would like to add that. So it's been popular because many families ask for eagles or a feather, and those are already available through the symbols we offer. And related to like culture as well is a big component of the program is adding the traditional name of the veteran. And it's retroactive. So if we've placed a tombstone in the past and we did not add the traditional name, we'll go back and add it. And it's also for any new tombstones as well. And the family gets the choice as well of, where that name is placed. So usually we follow the name, rank, unit, but sometimes the family wants the traditional name above the English name, so that's completely fine as well. We try to work with families so that the tombstone is really like as beautiful as they envision it to be. So I would say that's kind of how we tackle that.
That's perfect. I've only got a few seconds, so I'll ask one quick last question. So I'm just curious because in BC, a Cree designer wouldn't necessarily be the right style. So I'm just wondering if they have a clan emblem that's been made by the community, is that something you can add to the tombstone?
Yeah, definitely. And we will also, sometimes we had a family, they did their own drawing and it was like a pencil drawing and we can digitalize it for them and everything. We had a really beautiful one installed in a cemetery in Victoria and it was drawn by a nephew of the veteran. So we were super honored to be able to have that emblem on the tombstone.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Trujillo. And now let's start a second round of questions. And I'm pleased to start with Mr. MP Terry Doddell for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'm pleased that you're pleased. That's great. I want to thank all the witnesses for being here today. It's great to have all of you back. My first question is going to be as well going back to the last post fund. I know there was an article out in November, so just basically a month ago, and in the letter, I guess the past president Derek Sullivan was quite concerned, I guess, to how the the Field of Honor is going to continue to go the way it is. And since 2020, there's been a push for VAC to assume ownership on the site. And September 4th, I know that your organization sent a letter to Minister Petitpas-Taylor basically outlining that the future of the Veterans Cemetery is now in a serious jeopardy. Current operating deficits means that the LPF can sustain operations only for a short period of time. And I know the letter went out September 4th, and there was no strike at that time. But and you were hoping to have an answer by November 11th. You thought it might be a good time with Remembrance Week. No letter was received. Her office, the only time that there was contact was after CTV News actually phoned and followed up on it. And they've been told that they're looking and assessing the feasibility. So I'm just wondering, first of all, what does that say about the urgency and the respect, number one? And number two, has there been any follow-up as of yet to see exactly what that study and feasibility is?
Yeah, no, I can answer just by saying that I specifically take care of the Indigenous Veterans Initiative. So I am aware that the cemetery, the National Field of Honor, it's a request that's been put through the transfer, but I can't really speak to it because it's really not in my domain. That would be the last post-fund president or the executive director, but they're not present, so I don't really want to say anything that is really for them to speak on. I'm sorry about that.
If you could ask them or have them follow up just to see if there is a letter or something that has come back that outlining exactly what the study and the feasibility, and if there's any possible timeline, that would really be greatly appreciated. My next questions are going to now go over to, I guess they'll go to you, Marianne. And I'm just wondering, can you share with our committee how many homeless veterans live in Canada? And how those numbers would be reached?
So that is a great question because we know that's a concern. I don't have that number top of mind. I don't know if Miriam would either. We recognize that homelessness, housing issues with veterans is an area of significant concern, but I don't have that data personally.
Ever done a study to see exactly how many homeless veterans we have?
We've done a number of research studies. We haven't done anything specific on researching veteran homelessness.
Okay, this should never been asked, because I know that government, the numbers are all over the place. Like some people are saying 2,000, some are 10,000. It just seems like there's such a wide variety that it would be one of those issues that would probably, you would want to know that number. I think that would be an important study.
I don't have that top of mind. I don't want to speak for my team that's more closely connected with some of the work that intersects with those issues, of course, so.
Okay. So in the course of this study, the committee has heard that Indigenous veterans are at a higher risk of homelessness than other groups of veterans. Have you conducted any research on this, and why would you think this would be the case?
We have at Atlas not conducted a study on Indigenous veterans and their risk for homelessness yet. Our focus so far on work related to First Nations, Inuit, Métis, Indigenous veterans has been what Miriam has outlined in terms of working collaboratively to respond to knowledge needs to support mental health and wellness. I could say, you know, based on what we know around some of the social determinants of health and what might put people in, what might contribute to people experiencing issues like homelessness or housing. I think it's a lot of the issues that we understand around social determinants of health might be factors there. I mean, I think we're hearing a lot around issues just related to the housing crisis in Canada, plus like you're exacerbating that around things like systemic racism and so on, which I think has come through testimony through this committee. I would venture that those factors would all be at play.
So no one's actually reached out to you yet to study some of these issues or give you a heads up that this is what we should be looking into?
So we, through the work that we do in terms of identifying what research we undertake, because there's a lot of needs actually. I think that's an important overarching message here is that when it comes to veteran family mental health, there are a lot of needs that need to be looked at, including with specific subpopulations of veterans. And we address that in Indigenous veterans, Black veterans being amongst those groups where there's more to be researched.
What?
Sorry.
He's shutting us down. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So sorry, Mr. Dardel, even though I'm pleased to give you the floor, but time is over, and I'd like to invite Ms. Lisa Hefner for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to go back to Madame Maria Trujillo. I'm pronouncing your name that way because I lived in Honduras for a year, and there's a major city by that name, so please let me know if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. But your work seems really important in terms of our efforts towards reconciliation. I'm wondering if you would comment on that, whether you agree.
Yeah, definitely. I think through our work, a secondary effect of it has been that there has been more recognition of the fact that so many Indigenous veterans served in the world wars and continue to serve. So we place tombstones both in Indigenous communities, but also in non-Indigenous communities in municipal cemeteries. So I think a secondary effect of having that tombstone in a municipal cemetery with an Indigenous symbol, with an Indigenous name is, I think it's like a chance for non-Indigenous Canadians to see how many Indigenous veterans served. So I do think that when someone walks by a tombstone that has a cultural symbol or an Indigenous name, and they're not aware that so many Indigenous veterans served in the Canadian Armed Forces, it's sort of like an educational moment for them. So I think it serves as well to educate non-Indigenous Canada of the huge contribution that Indigenous veterans have had and continue to have in the Canadian Armed Forces. So I think it builds a bridge in that sense as well. So the reconciliation can also be an educative moment for non-Indigenous Canadians. And I think adding the traditional name is a really important component as well. We know the traditional names and Indigenous languages were something that in residential schools were banned, and sort of adding the traditional name to the grave marker is a way to hopefully reclaim the history for the families that did lose their traditional names and their languages in residential schools. So I think that's like a small step, and we know that that's an important component of reconciliation, is bringing back Indigenous languages. Yeah, I think it creates visibility of, in summary, creates visibility of the cultures that served, I would say.
It's really important work. Thank you so much for that. I understand there's a documentary or a film underway. Would you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so it's a short documentary. It was released in 2022. It was thanks to the generous funding of the Bank of Montreal, and it covers the work that we did with 3 communities, one in Quebec, which is Kitigan-Zibi, the other one in Saskatchewan, which is Kawakatus First Nation, and the third one is our work in the Northwest Territories and our collaboration with retired Master Warrant Officer Floyd Powder. And the documentary serves to document the work we've done in sort of those 3 corners of Canada. And it captures both that it's tricky work to an extent, like finding the unmarked grave, but it also captures the impact it has on the community. What I like about it is sort of we see the generational impact as well. So we see that it brings the community together and younger members of the community too. It gives them pride to see that, their grandfather, their grandmother served. So it's on our website, and it's free and open to the public. So if you do want to see it, you can just Google the Last Post Fund, and then under the Indigenous Veterans Initiative, it's available for everyone to see.
I will make a point of doing that. Thank you very much. And I would like to turn now to Inspire, Mr. Sheed. I'm hoping you can talk to us a bit more about the challenges many Indigenous veterans face in the transition from military service, particularly in terms of education and employment. Perhaps you have some suggestions or ideas about how the government can better support those veterans in their transition.
Mr. Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Let's start with a suggestion. Governments, particularly the federal government, has a tremendous bureaucracy that can identify problems, but I think they have difficulty delivering. And the organizations that I find that can deliver some of the needed services to Aboriginal people, Indigenous people, including veterans, can largely be achieved better by volunteer organizations. For example, the Canadian Corps of Commissionaires. They have, for years, decades, been involved helping veterans find employment and other benefits that are needed, and the Legion as well, and all of the veterans organizations. They're close to the ground. Veterans are not concentrated in one particular locality. They're all over the place. So you need to have a veteran, a volunteer organization to do the service.
Thank you, Mr. Shedd, and maybe you will have another questions. Mais pour l'instant, je voudrais encore une fois...
But now I'll give the floor yet again to Mr. Martin Champoux for a short 2.5 minutes. I'll try to be brief. Ms. Trujillo, you have been doing very important work, and I was able to discuss in my writing with a widow of a service person who had passed away and was Indigenous, and she was looking at the names on the cenotaph, and we had a discussion, and she said that's not his name. And I was shocked because that's not something that was being talked about publicly. And the work that you're doing with grave markers and the respect that you're giving back to Indigenous service members, it's so important. Is this something that you would like to do for cenotaphs, for example? And it's important to recognize these veterans and celebrate their origins and their Indigenous roots. Do you intend to do more currently, because it is so important?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question.
So far, we really just focus on providing grave markers. The question of cenotaph does come up, and what we usually do is we redirect the community to the funds that are available through Veterans Affairs, such as I think it's called you guys probably know, but the Commemorative Partnership Fund. So there's been some communities that have been able to get new cenotaphs or repair existing cenotaphs for precisely, adding new names or adding new members. So we usually refer them to VAC for that. And since, the Last Post Fund, our mission is really focused on providing grave markers and our funeral and burial program as well. But we do try to create that link between ourselves and our main funder, which is Veterans Affairs Canada, and the programs that Veterans Affairs offers veteran communities for that. So I think that will be our focus for now. But we do try to create those links and see which other organizations are doing programs that we can maybe refer people to.
Je vous remercie. Merci beaucoup. C'est très important.
Thank you. And what you're doing is very important. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Champoux. And now we will give the floor to Miss Rachel Blaney.
Minutes and a half, please.
Well, thank you, Chair. And I have a question or two for Atlas, and I will let either one of you decide who the right person is to answer. I guess I basically have a couple of questions. One is I really heard how broad you try to get veterans to participate. So one of the things that I would like to hear a little information about is how do you address mental health issues? We know that some veterans have mental health challenges, and I'm really curious about how the space is made safe for those veterans to express what they need to, but actually have the support and have maybe the aftercare they may require. And then the other question is around diversity. We've seen in this study that the voice of Black veterans is not coming out. And I've talked to several people from that community, and there's a very clear resistance to coming out, which I found really concerning. So I'm just wondering, in terms of making sure that when you're doing study on veterans, that Indigenous, Black, people of color's voices are actually heard, and how do you address that nuance? I'm just curious if you could talk about that from a research perspective.
Yeah, both are very important questions, and so thank you for that. On that second question, I mean, for the research that we do, for the most part, we are actively trying to ensure we have diversity across all our studies, and there's ways to do that. I recognize, too, there may be populations that, there could be mistrust with research. So it is so, so important that we build on visibility and relationships and doing outreach and getting out there and, growing our network as well, and in trying our best to ensure that there's diversity amongst our network so that we can, again, build on those relationships and get the word out so people can participate and we have that diversity reflected in our study. With respect to how we do our work, I mean, our mandate is around mental health and working with veterans with lived experience of PTSD and related mental health conditions and their families. And that's something that we absolutely take very seriously around our work, because we're bringing people around the table to inform knowledge products, as Miriam's spoken about, to co-develop with us on often sensitive topics, intimate partner violence, military sexual trauma. Miriam can perhaps speak to some recent examples of what we put in place, because there are strategies that are trauma-informed that allow individuals to provide their feedback, though it is done in such a way that we're minimizing risk of harm. And when we engage these volunteers in that capacity, we often do have opportunities to connect with a mental health resource. So when we bring people together for events, for example, we have that. And perhaps Miriam wants to share more practical strategies.
Yeah, for sure. I can speak to one example of a project we conducted in this fashion, which is the resources we developed related to military sexual trauma. So we brought together a group of folks who had either experienced military sexual trauma themselves or were service providers who provide care for those who've experienced military sexual trauma. And we had the intention of creating resources, informational resources around the topic, but really let them lead the way in telling us what exactly is it about military sexual trauma that the community wants to learn more about. And so that's one way that we engage folks to make sure the content that we cover through our resources is going to be relevant. And so they support us in identifying the subtopics that will go into the resources, as well as how to disseminate the resources once they're ready so they can reach the people that need to see them.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to have the two last interventions of 5 minutes each. One from Ms. Wagenthal and the other one for Mr. Kissy. So, Mrs. Wagenthal, 5 minutes, please.
5 minutes. Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you again for being here with us today. I'd like to follow up, Marianne, on your comments about funding. You indicated that you did have some partners public, and you specifically mentioned Canadian Institute for Public Safety. Is that what it was called? Okay. So when did you do research for them? What year?
So we wrapped up a project with them, and I mean, I may have to also
just a date
follow up on details. Well, we partner ongoing in different ways, but our peer support community network, the portion that was funded, I believe, has wrapped up or is wrapping up.
What was the study on?
It wasn't a research study. It was related to convening a group of military, veteran, public safety personnel, family, peer support community, and bringing together a community network with the purpose of also creating some best practice guidelines around peer support within those groups.
Okay, and
those will be launching soon.
So
I can speak to another partnership with that group. In 2022, we also partnered with them to develop knowledge products, specifically for public safety personnel around post-traumatic stress injuries.
So those
and that
were-
was in 2022.
And that was actually done with a grant through Medavie Foundation.
Okay, so it wasn't
a time-limited small grant.
not focused on Canadian Armed Forces, it was on other service members.
In
It
that,
was also Canadian Armed Forces, yes.
Okay. So 2022. And then you mentioned Health Canada?
No, I was giving an example around how that was funding, that it was a Public Health Agency of Canada grant that CIPSR and Atlas were doing work connected to, but I think our funding flowed through CIPSR. So you'll have to forgive me if I'm not as
okay.
up on the details,
Yeah,
but can
that's
always
fine.
follow up with you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. So I do have questions around the last post fund that I would like to direct to you, because the government has indicated, or the minister has indicated, that they needed to do a feasibility study, and we're not sure where that is at right now. Is that something that you would take on? Just a yes or no? In regard to whether or not the government should take over the responsibility of the funding for the Field of Honor. So the last post fund is asking for assistance from the government to stay afloat.
So I think without having much context or time to think about it, that sounds like work that would actually be out of scope. It sounds like more about like a program evaluation work or feasibility study with respect to whether or not the government funds something, which I think would conflict with our arm's length relationship with Veterans Affairs Canada. But, I mean, again, something that I'm just responding to for the first time, having given that thought before.
I just think that if we're looking at something as important as these graves being maintained, we're hearing about Indigenous graves and how they haven't been marked, and the effort going to make sure that they're done properly. And here we have the potential, from what I'm seeing and hearing, of losing care for a very large cemetery in Montreal. So to me, the thought of an independent study on the importance of that particular remembrance area would be really important, that we have clear understanding of its value and the need for the government to take responsibility for it. So that's where I'm coming from.
And our recent studies for going external for partners, we go through a request for proposals process for that, and it's the recent one we did had specific topics. Again, I would also just share that from community, we know of the importance of that work and of that commemoration. And in fact, one of someone who was part of our inaugural reference group, which was an important body of volunteers to guide Atlas in their work. You know, our colleague spoke to him, Floyd Powder, who's been engaged in that initiative. So I just want to offer my respect to the work that's being done with that too.
Sure. Thanks, I appreciate that too. I'll just ask a few more questions around the homelessness issue. This has been going on for a long time, and no one can seem to come up with a number. And I know there are people that go out on a particular day and look at potential, and it is difficult to actually locate homeless people. A lot of them are very efficient at being homeless and couch surfing as well. But we can't really deal with the issue if we don't know the numbers. So is this something that you could do, reaching out to the various multiple organizations that are across Canada that do work with veterans transitioning, and get that information to a point where we would have a much clearer understanding of how many of our veterans are homeless at what point in time as they leave the service, or quite often we're hearing it's a decade later when they have struggled through trying to transition and haven't succeeded.
And I think in terms of the ability to just come back to that point is that the issues of housing and homelessness amongst veterans are something that are on our radar. And I know we had team members attend the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness conference that took place recently here. We are aware of some initiatives. We've worked in different ways with Vets Canada, who provides some of that emergency supports to veterans that are at risk. And so that's something that we also would like to look into more in terms of what Atlas's role might be on that topic as it intersects with
If
mental
the
health.
committee
Thank
could have any research
you.
that you've done and any views, if you could provide that
Thank
to
you,
us.
Mrs. Morgenthau. Thank you. Time is over, really. So I have to go to MP Sean Casey for the last 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to bring Mr. Larocque into the conversation. The opening statement that you gave to the committee on November the 28th, I think probably provided the most compelling evidence we could imagine as to the value of Inspire and what it represents. So I'm going to give you basically carte blanche to expand on whatever you wish, but I would appreciate if you would actually include a bit about your personal story, sir, and how this fund has helped you to become a law professor and a practicing lawyer, as well as a continuing member of the reserves.
Happy to. Yeah, thank you for the question. So I grew up in a small French Métis community in southern Manitoba. It wasn't very well off, as many Métis families are. And I knew that I wanted to pursue an education, but couldn't afford to go to university. And so I was very fortunate to be recruited into the armed forces through a Métis recruiter when I was 16. So I joined the Naval Reserve when I was 16, knowing that I would be able to receive some funding for my education and also would have a job. So I was very fortunate to join the Naval Reserve. I did my basic training when I had just turned 17, born in Ontario. And, the money that I made working in the reserves and the tuition reimbursement that the Canadian Armed Forces offered reservists helped me to attend my undergraduate program. And as well, I credit most of my success with the values that the CAF instilled in me through basic training and through my work in various domains in the Canadian Armed Forces. And Inspire, I wasn't aware of Inspire until a bit later in my education when I had to withdraw from university because I couldn't afford to live on my own in the city and attend university. So I actually went and worked full time in the Navy for a few years to save some more money to go back to school. And at that time, I learned of Inspire and applied and received some bursaries, which helped me to go back to school. And so I was very fortunate in that case to be able to go back to university to finish my undergraduate degree in economics. And all the while working in the reserves, sometimes as a full-time Class B or Class C member in various parts of Canada, and sometimes as a reservist, evenings and weekends in my at my home unit. And after I finished my undergraduate degree, I worked in the Canadian Armed Forces in the Royal Canadian Air Force for about 4 years full time before deciding to pursue further education and going to law school. And when I went to law school, I was a bit better off because I'd been working full time in the Canadian Armed Forces and was able to save some money. But I also relied on Inspire for additional funding. That helped me to not have to work 2 jobs while I was in law school. I still worked 1 job in the reserves, but I didn't have to take on additional debt and additional obligations. And so Inspire really supported me throughout my career. And, that allowed me to pursue education that I wouldn't have been able to pursue without both the Canadian Armed Forces support and Inspire support. And so I'm very, very fortunate and credit both the Canadian Armed Forces and Inspire and their support and the opportunities that they gave me for my success.
Thank you. We have about a minute left, and as a Métis veteran with 23 years of service and continuing to serve in the reserves, that's exactly what we're studying here is the experience of Indigenous and Black veterans. What advice do you have for the committee as someone who walks the walk?
I think part of the reason we don't see as many Indigenous veterans or Indigenous people staying in the forces is because there's not many of us in the forces to begin with. And, there's, I think, a lot of pride among Indigenous veterans, and there's a lot of history, but there's also a lot of bad history, and that turns Indigenous people off from joining the forces. And obviously, there's divisiveness in our country in relation to Indigenous rights and historic wrongs that have been perpetuated on Indigenous peoples. I think reconciliation is the answer, and in terms of being both Indigenous and a member of an Indigenous nation and a Canadian is something to be proud of. And I think that that needs to be instilled in young people, and it needs to be instilled in the public, and it needs to be a part of the conversation around reconciliation, that you can be both a member of an Indigenous nation and Canadian and be proud of both and serve both your communities and your country.
Thank you, and thank you for your service.
Thank you very much. Well, it was a great panel for the first hour, and it was also a good idea for members of the committee to re-invite those witnesses. So we had with us from de l'Institut Atlas pour les vétérans.
From the Atlas Institute for Veterans and Families, we had Marianne Notoriani, Deputy Chief Executive Officer and Executive Vice President, Knowledge Mobilization. Thank you. And with her, she had Miriam Ben-Lemri, Director, Knowledge Mobilization. From Inspire, we just heard from Mr. Yvan-Guy Larocque, Board of Directors, Clinical Council, University of Manitoba Faculty of Law, with Mr. William Shedd, Board of Directors. And finally, from the Last Post Fund, Ms. Maria Antonia Trujillo, Project Coordinator, Indigenous Veterans Initiative. We are going to suspend while we welcome the next witness for the next hour. Meeting suspended.
Mesdames, Messieurs, nous reprenons.
We are going to be resuming the meeting. We will now spend 30 minutes, the next 30 minutes on our study on Black and Indigenous veterans. We'll have 30 minutes with Mr. Bouchard Dulix Dorval, who is a veteran. He is participating by video conference as an individual. Welcome, Mr. Dorval. Usually, we ask the witnesses if they have any opening remarks, and witnesses are given 5 minutes. So if you would like to make some opening remarks, you have that opportunity to do so for the next 5 minutes. You have the floor, and please don't forget to turn on your microphone.
Voilà.
Merci, Monsieur le.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to the members of the committee. I don't have a lot to say, but I am pleased to be here. And to discuss with you, members who can support us. I'm learning what's been happening and what is going to happen, and I want to thank you. And thank you for allowing me to participate during this study. Thank you very much, Mr. Dorval. Committee members from each party will have a 6-minute question round. They can share their time with colleagues, and that's how we are going to proceed. And we'll start with
Oh, yes. Okay. So I give the floor for 6 minutes to Mr. Blake Richards to start questioning Mr. Dorval. Please go ahead.
Sure. First, Mr. Chair, I understood that we had another witness with us. Is that not no longer the case? I'm not in the room, so it's hard for me to.
Exactly. We were supposed to have Mr. Brian Prairie by video conference, but he canceled this morning, so he's not available. So that's why we are going to stay half an hour with Mr. Dorval, 20 minutes, I should say, and we have committee business right after. Please.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you,
You're
Chair.
welcome.
I appreciate that. It's sometimes hard to tell when you're virtual. So, no, appreciate you being here today, sir. And thank you for your willingness to come and speak with the committee. And certainly do have some questions for you. You didn't have obviously a lot of comments in the opening remarks. So, what I will do is afford you the opportunity. I think. One thing we've heard during the course of this study is that there exists within Canada's government departments and institutions systemic racism. Is that something that you would agree with, and why or why not?
That is incredibly true. It's true. There's a lot of work left to do. Things have changed. And when I was in Valcartier, things had already improved.
I guess in the context of what I would ask next, I guess, is in the context of veterans. Can you identify specific issues that exist, and can you identify any specific laws or policies that are in place which are enabling systemic racism within our departments or institutions?
I believe that legislation is not being respected. I think that it's very difficult. I think that at some point I felt a bit like an alien, and it was frustrating. And up until yesterday, even, I wondered how I was able to overcome all of the issues. It was when I was finally transferred to Montreal for my final 6 years, that's where I found that things changed. But it's not the same for everyone. That might be my own path that was problematic, but it was frustrating. Things happened to me, and I had to file a grievance, but I couldn't even tell my family about what had happened to me. And I had to overcome the issues because I wanted to be a part of the armed forces, and I had energy and I wanted to prove myself. But yeah, I was able to overcome the adversity.
Well, we're certainly glad to hear that. And I can you maybe just tell me, how long did you serve in the forces? And you mentioned that you what you felt was that there was a bit of a change. Oh, go ahead.
For 19 years. Yeah, 19 years.
And you mentioned that there was a bit of a change for you when you went to Montreal. Yeah. So what changed there? Was it just people and personalities, or is there specific policies that you saw change or laws that you saw change that sort of helped to improve things?
I think it's just the city, and there were more of us, and there are more services available in Montreal as well. And the environment is different. We were able to work with civilians, and things were different. In Quebec City was very difficult. It always felt like I was at war with someone, but I didn't have that impression in Montreal, and that's where I was able to really take a breath. And yeah, the different environment really helped. And when I left Quebec, I filed grievances and I won, but they told me that I should stay in order to help other Black service members who will go through something similar as you. But I would have had to leave Quebec.
And what year did you retire from the forces?
C'était en 2019.
In 2019, 17th of April.
Okay, so in the 5+ years since you've been out of the forces, you're obviously now you're a veteran. You would consider yourself a veteran. You are a veteran. Thank you for your service. What's your experience been like as a veteran? With Veterans Affairs or with the government? Have you experienced systemic racism as a veteran?
Monsieur Richard.
Apologies, Mr. Richards. I can give perhaps 20 seconds to Mr. Dorval to respond to the question because your 6 minutes is up. Mr. Dorval, you have about 20 seconds to answer the question, please. Can we repeat the question?
In your 5+ years as a veteran, have you dealing with Veterans Affairs or with other government departments or institutions as a veteran, have you experienced systemic racism there?
No, pas du tout.
No, not at all. services were great, and I'm quite satisfied with the services. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Dorval. I will now give the floor to Mr. Randeep Sarai for 6 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for having coming back on this. Mr. Dorval, can you tell us a little bit about the challenges, what kind of racism, what kind of challenges you face while serving in the military?
Doors were closed to me. When I entered into the Army, I had a family, I had a car, so I was giving rides to other members. But once you get onto the base, we have to do tests. And everyone passed except for me, even though I already had a car and a life, and so it seemed to be a little ridiculous. So I was often frustrated. I felt like doors were always closed to me. A captain told me that I was going to pass a test, but he told me that my file was quite big, and because I was often frustrated, there was a lot of stuff in my file. And so instead of signing a document, I ripped it up, threw it in the garbage because they didn't let me pass. And I said, there were too many negative tests. I said, I don't need this. I ripped up the paper. And then I had to work under a captain. And then at Borden, there was another course. And I met with similar people, and the doors were yet again closed. Everyone had passed their exams from Monday to Friday. They asked me to do it at 11 p.m. on a Friday night, and then they denied me, and they asked me to retest, and that's when I broke down. It was the same person who was doing this to me, and when I filed a grievance, I think that's when measures were taken and that person was removed. Thank you.
Good to know that when you did a grievance, it was removed. So maybe tell me about the processes. You said they've improved. Perhaps you can let us know how they've improved in those processes. It's bad that sad that you've had to go through this and face those and go to that point where you have to report it. But can you maybe let us know how those processes improved, and maybe even in that process, how could it be improved even further?
Chain of command was very focused on my file, especially in Ottawa. When Ottawa received my file, General Alex Tremblay, and I'll never forget his name, went to Valcartier on the lunch hour and asked to meet with the whole battalion downstairs and said to everyone, I'm not proud of you. This is not why you came into the forces, including Black service members. So he put everyone on blast, basically. And when a commander comes in, a general comes in, they start by saying good things, and he went straight in and blasted everyone because of my file, and people spoke to each other and continued closing doors to me. Nobody wanted to talk to me anymore, and I had to switch jobs. But then I went to the BPSO to prepare for a new job, but nobody was helping me because the major was aware of my file. It was me against them. And so I had to do everything by myself in order to go back to Borden for another job. But I wasn't supported like other service members are when they want to change positions. So I had to do it by myself as a corporal, and I was able to do so, as always. And with the comments from the General Alex Tremblay, that helped. It really did. And it's someone who came from Ottawa, put his foot down, and it was great to see what one person can do. But having to do a test at midnight, and before doing my test, they took my sheet and they put -15 just to play with my mind. And when I went to do my test, I passed. I did everything I needed to do. And there were many who did not meet the time, they didn't finish, but they passed and I didn't. And they told me that I wouldn't have time to finish my test, so they sent me back to Valcartier, and I had to drive quickly to get to Valcartier, but I didn't say anything to my family. I filed a grievance, but yeah, I wasn't able to mention it to my family. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dorval. Mr. Dorval, there will be 2 more rounds of questions. I have Mr. Martin Champoux, who has questions for you for the next 6 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Champoux. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Dorval, thank you for being with us today. 19 years in the Canadian Forces, in the Canadian Armed Forces, and you left in 2019. You were transferred and finished at Long Point? Yes. You were saying that you were a driver. In what division were you? 2nd Battalion. And that was at Valcartier, and then I went to Supply Tech. And that's where I was in Montreal for courses. Thank you, Monsieur Dorval, and thank you for being with us today, and thank you for sharing your story with us. I found it very interesting. I wasn't listening to the English interpretation, but you talked about blowing a fuse. I wonder how the interpreters interpreted that for my Anglophone colleagues, but I love that you were speaking without a filter. You shared your experience that was quite difficult over the years, and you said something that I noticed. You stated that when you arrived in Montreal, you felt like the burden had lessened. Was it a cultural change? Was it just because of leaving a toxic environment? Why was it that once you arrived in Montreal, things felt better? It was better for a Black person. It's a city that has more Black people, perhaps, but there were a lot of civilians there as well. So the approach is different. And the mentality was different. And so you identify with the mentality more of Montreal. Yes. And I believe that that's what you were referencing when you stated that you felt a bit like an alien. It's because you didn't feel like you were in your element at the time. Not exactly. It's because I wasn't able to go through the same doors as everyone else. The doors were always closed to me. I was a driver for a 16-ton. Usually it's 2 people who drive that, but I was always alone to do a task that is usually done by 2 people. Always alone. So I never had any teammates with me. That's quite significant. Mr. Dorval, I heard in your answers to previous questions to my colleagues, you talked about the issues that you faced during the time of your service, and you stated that since leaving the armed forces, you're satisfied with your service from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Did I understand correctly? Yes. Yes, I have no complaints. I find that quite interesting. As MPs, usually it's very rare that people will call us and say, yeah, I don't have any issues with the department. Everything's going great. They gave me my benefits. Usually when people reach out to us, it's to say that things aren't going well. I'm not receiving my benefits that I am owed or services that I am owed. Do you have any, or did you have any specific needs after leaving in 2019? Did you have to communicate with the Department of Veterans Affairs? Did you have any specific reasons or any specific services that you needed access to? I think that the solutions for my problems were already there. I was well served. For my pension, it was fine because I'm 60 years old. How old are you? You said 60. 64. You look a lot younger than that. Yeah, I think everything was already ready for me when I retired. I just had to indicate that I was retiring. I can't speak for anyone else, but it went well for me. Mr. Dorval, thank you. That's refreshing because, as I was saying, we never hear about things that are going well. We often hear about things that aren't going well. And knowing that you had a path that was full of obstacles, it's good to know that you are receiving positive and timely responses to your requests. And I would like to thank you for taking the time to testify today. And Mr. Dorval, thank you again for your service. It's something that I greatly respect. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you, Mr. Champoux. And thank you, Mr. Dorval. And now one final round of questions from Miss Rachel Blaney, who will be asking you questions for the next 6 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair. And I just want to thank you, Mr. Dorval, for your information today. It's already been really helpful. And I just want to say that I thought it was interesting, some of the questions you were being asked about systemic racism and what policies. But to me, when I heard you say things like always at war with someone, doors always closed, chain of command, very used to looking at my file, alone doing a task that was meant for 2. Those are very good examples of systemic racism. It's built right in the system, and it's often invisible except for to those who actually experience it. So thank you for putting on the record so clearly what that experience was like for you. I think that's extremely helpful. So a question I have for you is, you said that, I'm not sure who it was that asked you to stay to help other Black service members. Could you tell us a little bit about who asked you to do that and what was that labor for you? What kind of work did you do in that area?
Ben, c'est parce que
I could write very well and defend myself quite well. So I had that. And when people made decisions against me, and I was able to write a report, and that helped me. And because I always had to fight for myself, and I always won, well, there were many who were not able to stay, but the person who helped me was a lieutenant. He helped me because he was kept in the position of lieutenant for 9 years. And he was able to get a PhD in human resources, or administration rather. And so he was able to help me, and we evolved together. He was an officer and sent my file up, and I was a corporal, and he helped me with my files. And he said to me that I had fought well, but there are going to be others who are going to be in the same position as you, and you know how to write well, and perhaps you could help them out as well. And so I was able to develop my abilities, and I was able to help. I was a bit of a warrior with my pen, in a way. I was able to defend myself and maintain my position.
Of being a warrior with a pen. I'm really happy that you had that, and I'm happy you were able to share that, although I think that shouldn't have been your responsibility. The system should have done better so that you didn't have to fight so hard. But thank you for explaining that to us. You also said again and again that you were told you couldn't talk to your family about your grievance. So I'm just wondering if you could expand on that a little bit, like who said you couldn't and what was the rationale? And I'm just curious that not being able to talk to people that you trust about a hard thing must be hard on your mental health. So I'm just wondering if you had any impacts with your mental health having to deal with this so consistently.
Ben, je m'excuse parce que j'ai.
I think I didn't express myself clearly. It's not that I was not allowed to do so. But when I went to do a course in Borden, I was there for 2.5 months, and then I had to do my test at 11 p.m. because if I didn't, I knew they would fail me. And then Monday was graduation, so I was rushed. They gave me a test right at the end so that I would fail. And the one who did that to me was happy to pick up all my things, put it in the car, send me back to Quebec. And that's when I cried on the road. I didn't want to tell my family why I was there, but on the Monday morning, I showed up to my battalion, and they asked me why I was there. And, well, I said I was going to pass. I definitely... And I was asked, or I was told I had gone there to learn, and it was a formality. And that's when they called the school, and the process started. Nobody had stopped me from speaking to my family, but I found it humiliating and frustrating, and having to go through that as a service member, that was upsetting. There were some that wouldn't even call me Corporal Dorval. They would just say the Haitian guy. So it was very frustrating. They used to call me the Haitian on the base. the only time is when there was sports and soccer. I was good. I was the one scoring all the goals. So now they would call me by my name. And that was very helpful. That's when they respected me.
Wanted to say, just to make sure I got it correct, that it was General Tremblay. Is that correct? The one that helped, that spoke to people and said enough? Is that correct?
Oui.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
Merci.
J'oublie jamais ce nom.
I will never forget his name. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Blaney. Mr. Dorval, I would have a question for you. During the 19 years of your service, were you deployed abroad? I was deployed to Haiti. That's why they called me the Haitian. I offered the service that I could, and I knew people there. Everyone wanted to speak to their families, and I wanted people to be able to facilitate service members speaking with their families. But over those 19 years, were there any missions abroad other than in Haiti? I was part of operations, but I had dislocated a shoulder or had shoulder issues, so I had to stay behind for recovery because I had hurt my shoulder. So that's what happened during operations. Thank you very much, Mr. Dorval. I think that you and your colleagues paved the way, and it was not for nothing. Thank you so much for being a part of the armed forces. Thank you so much for your contribution to our study on Black and Indigenous veterans. We are going to suspend, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Mr. Dorval, happy holidays. Thank you so much.
Le temps qu'on passe.